saying. And should we just start with point one, systematic versus discretionary?
Yeah. How do you want to play it?
Yeah. Go through that.
Yes, I guess this is sort of the whole idea behind systematic investing is all to do with the sort of common behavioral biases that people have, and it's the whole idea of having a process where you're trying to separate objectivity from emotion. So that's a lot of the idea of investing or sort of doing most things in terms of in running companies or anything like that is about having a disciplined process that you go through to deliver some outcomes. Now, the beauty of applying that in a systematic manner is that you don't let common behavioral biases get in the way of that process. So, for instance, if you're looking at it from a more discretionary standpoint than looking at a systematic investing process, you may want to buy it. You may be interested in investing in a stock because when you went and met the CEO seemed like a really nice guy, got you a really nice cup of coffee, which made you think you really like that company, which doesn't necessarily translate into a good investment proposition versus looking at it from a more systematic manner. You take that emotion aside, you focus purely on the data, which is expected to drive good returns going forward. Len, I don't know if you...
Yeah, so what most discretionary managers would say their process is the three R's they always use: rigorous, robust, and repeatable. But we know, as Anthony mentioned, that heuristic bias or human bias is prevalent in all of us. And so even though you might have a rigorous process, it is always difficult to remove some of those biases. And I'm not sure that this piece should necessarily cover the extent of those, but you have home bias, you have bias with regards to house money, biases with regards to whether a position has been performing well or not in your portfolio. And so, doing things systematically removes those biases, so you almost ensure a robust and repeatable process.
I guess as well, and a good example of that is if you take our AlphaDex US large cap core products. In the depths of 2008, you saw a lot of the factors in terms of equity investing start to struggle. So you were seeing a lot of the value stocks were getting cheaper. People were constantly selling. So you see, if you look at the aggregate fund manager, they were starting to get worried. Their process wasn't working. They were suffering lots and lots of drawdowns. So they're sort of thinking, if the process isn't working, the natural human reaction is, if it's not working, I need to fix it. I need to do something. So you ended up seeing on aggregate a lot of that fund managers realizing the loss in the depths of 2008 and missing out on some of the rally in 2009 versus what you see in the AlphaDex process, where it was able to, whilst it drew down in 2008, it was able to significantly outperform in 2009 by sticking to those factors and protecting against the common human trait that if something's not working, I need to fix it. Where sometimes the best thing to do is, if something's not working, it's better to wait rather than change it.
Got it. You're sounding very good. That's lovely. And it's a lovely warm tone because you've got me visualizing stuff already, and you've given me good quantifiable anecdotes as well. So have we explored the discretionary? As how much weight do you want to put on the discretionary element of Section 1?
I sort of more focus on, because the whole idea of systematic versus discretionary, as Len was mentioning, that could be a whole piece in its own right. look at Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow. His whole life's work was written on that kind of idea of the behavioral biases, the whole concept of behavioral finance. So I guess we probably want to more touch on it and just say, look, there's well documented, there's a lot of ideas that there's a challenge with human behavior, which is why we want to focus on systematic. And unless, Len, you wanted to go into discretionary a bit more.
I think we just need one bit so that we can outline the difference.
Or more in terms of, I guess, digging into it a bit more. It is obviously a lot more prevalent than systematic investing. But what we've seen, it might be getting a bit too technical, but what we've seen from the FCA study into active managers, you tend to find that a lot of active managers don't necessarily apply a lot of that discretion. They end up being closet trackers. I guess the broad outlook is, well, we need active managers or discretionary managers to efficiently allocate capital in an economy. Right, so that's one of the big reasons why they say, market cap or passive investing cannot work in its entirety, because then you have no one weeding out the good versus bad investments, because everything's based on market cap. So fine. So we move to active discretionary, where we're saying, well, even not looking at efficient market hypothesis, but at the margin, you will have smart managers out there who will be able to discern between good and bad investments, and so you'll efficiently allocate capital. But what we've found from the evidence is a vast majority of those active managers are either closet trackers or just not very good at what they do. And it's very difficult to select between the ones that are very good at what they do and the ones that aren't very good at what they do. The investing field is touching on stuff that Michael Mauboussin's work is a large percentage of outcomes in investing are determined by pure luck. Right, so there's a very big proportion of returns which, although you might have a very good investment process and stick to that process, just by pure luck that or by market movements, you might not have a good outcome. And so it's just discerning between those managers that have a very good process, and even if they've had bad luck or poor performance, it's focusing on that process element. But it's very difficult to do that.
I guess one thing that you could sort of speak about maybe on some benefits where a more discretionary process may work well is in very niche areas where it's a very small number of it, is very specialized investing where having a more discretionary approach can work because there's just not enough data on that industry to be able to implement a systematic process, like maybe some real estate type transactions, some private equity and things like that. But as soon as you move from and that's where a human can have expertise and experience in a discretionary manner where they can add value if you can't get access to that data. But as soon as you start moving out, as soon as there starts to be more parameters or more variables associated with the process, and as soon as there's more decisions to be made, it becomes a lot more challenging for a pure human or pure discretionary approach to work. So, for instance, how can you value the futures price of soybeans versus the price of a healthcare or a technology company? It's very difficult to do that in a purely discretionary manner, which is where systems can come into play and computers can come into play to help more efficiently allocate capital, where individual siloed people in a discretionary manner may struggle to be able to compare very different types of investments.